My name is Cora Hemlock. For most of my 62 years, I've considered myself a simple woman, rooted in the gentle rhythms of the earth. My late husband, Arthur, used to say I had soil under my fingernails and starlight in my eyes. We lived a quiet, content life in Port Blossom, a small coastal town where the scent of salt and roses mingles in the air. Arthur was a history professor at the local college, a man of books and quiet contemplation, and I was, and still am, a botanist. I spent my career curating the town's public gardens, and now, in retirement, I tend to my own small patch of green behind my apartment and work part-time at the Driftwood Nursery. My life is measured in seasons, in the unfurling of new leaves and the patient wait for a bloom. I have one son, Daniel. He was the sun in our small universe, bright and full of promise. When Arthur passed away from a sudden heart attack 10 years ago, the light in my world dimmed, but the glow from Daniel sustained me. He was my reason to keep tending the garden, to keep finding the beauty in a world that had suddenly felt barren. After Arthur's death, I sold our larger family home and moved into a comfortable 2-bedroom apartment overlooking the estuary. It was practical, manageable, and held no ghosts. The one piece of my past I couldn't part with was my childhood home, a lovely old cottage on a bluff overlooking the sea. My parents had built it, and its pale blue siding had earned it the name, the Periwinkle House, from everyone in town. It was where I learned to identify constellations with my father and press flowers with my mother. Every floorboard held a memory, every window framed a view I knew by heart. I couldn't bear to sell it, so I kept it, maintaining the garden and paying the taxes, dreaming that one day Daniel might raise his own family there. That dream seemed to be coming true 2 years ago when Daniel and his wife, Isabel, moved back to Port Blossom. Daniel had taken a big swing at the tech world in the city, but his startup had folded. They arrived with bruised egos and a mountain of debt, their city dreams dissolved. "Just for a little while, Mom," Daniel had said, his arm around my shoulder, his voice carrying the same earnest charm it had since he was a boy. "Just until we get back on our feet. Isabel's found a marketing job here, and I'm looking for remote work. We just need a place to land." Of course, I said yes. I gave them the keys to the Periwinkle house. Seeing lights on in the windows again, seeing my son living within the walls that had raised me, felt like a kind of beautiful, cyclical poetry. I pictured future grandchildren running through the very rooms I had, their laughter echoing mine. The thought filled the hollow spaces Arthur's absence had left behind. "We'll pay rent as soon as we can," Cora, Isabel said, her smile bright but her eyes scanning the living room with a critical air. "This place has such good bones. A bit dated, but so much potential." I smiled back, choosing to hear the compliment and ignore the sting of the qualifier. "Don't worry about rent," I said. "Just make it a home." And so, it began. My quiet, ordered life found a new purpose, supporting them. I'd bring over casseroles and fresh vegetables from my garden. I'd spend weekends helping Daniel clear the overgrown ivy from the old stone wall, my hands happily plunged back into the soil of my youth. In those early months, it felt right. It felt like family. I was the matriarch, the anchor, and it was a role I embraced with an open, if somewhat naive, heart. I didn't see the subtle shifts, the slow erosion of boundaries, the way the tide of their needs was beginning to pull my own life out from under me. I was too busy watering the seeds of a dream that, I would later realize, was not my own. The first dissonant note in our family symphony was quiet, almost imperceptible. It was a Saturday in late spring, the air thick with the scent of jasmine from the vines I'd trained over the porch trellis decades ago. I'd brought over a flat of heirloom tomato seedlings for the garden. "Oh, Cora, you shouldn't have," Isabel said, emerging from the house. She was dressed in sleek, gray athletic wear that looked more expensive than my entire wardrobe. She glanced at the rich, dark soil in the cardboard tray with a faint wrinkle of her nose. Daniel was actually thinking of putting in a fire pit there. You know, for entertaining. More of a social space. "Oh," I said, my hands still cradling the seedlings. "But this is the sunniest spot. Your tomatoes would love it here." "I'm just not much of a vegetable garden person," she said with a light, dismissive laugh. "Too much work for a few tomatoes, don't you think?" We were thinking more low maintenance. Gravel, maybe some minimalist succulents. Daniel came out then, wiping his hands on his jeans. He saw the seedlings, saw my face, and immediately went into his role as mediator. Hey, Mom. Thanks for these. We'll find a spot for them, don't you worry. He shot a look at Isabel. We can put the fire pit on the other side of the patio, honey. Plenty of room. Isabel sighed, a small, put-upon sound. Fine. But the garden is getting a bit wild, Cora. We want it to look a little more polished. Modern. I looked at the garden my mother had designed, a riot of English cottage charm with its rambling roses, fragrant lavender, and patches of cheerful daisies. It was a garden meant to be lived in, not just looked at. Polished, I repeated softly. The word felt cold, sterile. I planted the tomatoes in a less ideal spot near the back fence, my earlier enthusiasm curdled into a quiet unease. It was their home now, I reminded myself. I had to let them make it their own. But a small, persistent voice whispered that they weren't just making it their own, they were erasing what it had been. Erasing me. The requests for money started just as subtly. It began with utilities. Mom, the heating bill for this old house is insane, Daniel would say over the phone. Could you help us out just this month? We're still catching up. Of course, I would transfer the money. Then it was property taxes. It's still in your name, Mom, so the bill came to you, he'd explain, and it made perfect sense. I paid it without a second thought. But then came the upgrades. The dishwasher is ancient, Mom, Daniel said one evening. It's probably costing a fortune in water. A new energy-efficient one would be a smart investment. An investment. That was the word they always used. It wasn't a cost, it was an investment in the property. My property. And so, I paid for a new dishwasher. Then a new water heater. Then a quote for replacing the drafty, original windows, which I politely declined, explaining that the cost, nearly $10,000, was well beyond my means. Isabel's disappointment was palpable. But Cora, the original windows are so inefficient. Think of the long-term savings, she'd pressed, as if I were a stubborn child refusing to see reason. It would increase the value of the house so much. The house's value is fine as it is, Isabel, I'd said, a firmness in my voice that surprised even me. After that, a chill settled between us. My visits became less frequent. The casseroles I brought over were often met with, "Oh, we were just about to order sushi, but thank you." The home I had given them was becoming a place where I felt like an intruder. My friend Margot, who ran the local bookstore and had a tongue as sharp as a paper cut, saw it all with unnerving clarity. We were having coffee one afternoon at a cafe overlooking the harbor. "So, you're still funding the lifestyles of the young and entitled?" she asked, stirring her latte with more force than necessary. "It's not like that, Margot," I started, the familiar defense rising automatically. "They're just getting started." "Cora, honey," she said, her expression softening. "They've been getting started for 2 years. In a house you own. A house you pay the taxes on. A house you are now apparently renovating for them piece by piece. When does it end? Daniel is my son. I know. And he's a good man, deep down. But he's letting that woman walk all over him, and in turn, they're both walking all over you. You're retired. You're supposed to be enjoying your life, not financing theirs." She leaned forward, her gaze intense. "What's your nest egg looking like these days?" I flinched. I hadn't wanted to look too closely at my bank statements. I knew the balance was significantly lower than it had been 2 years ago. The cost of the dishwasher, the water heater, the endless smaller contributions for bills and groceries, it had added up to a sum that made my stomach clench. "Their family," I whispered, more to convince myself than her. "Family doesn't treat you like a walking ATM," she retorted. "They're confusing your kindness with weakness, Cora. And if you don't put up a fence, they will graze in your pasture until it's bare." Margot's words echoed in my mind for days. A fence. A boundary. It was a concept I understood in gardening. You build a fence to protect delicate plants from deer, but I had never thought to apply it to my own son. The idea felt unnatural, harsh. The breaking point, when it came, wasn't about money. It was about a tree. A magnificent Japanese maple that my father had planted in the front yard the year I was born. Its leaves turned a breathtaking shade of crimson in the autumn, a beacon of fiery beauty against the soft blue of the house. It was, to me, the heart of the front garden. I drove by one Tuesday afternoon on my way back from the nursery, and I saw it. Or rather, I didn't see it. In its place was a raw, pale stump, surrounded by a mess of sawdust and butchered limbs. I pulled the car over, my heart hammering against my ribs. I got out and walked toward the house in a daze. The air smelled of fresh-cut wood and death. The entire front of the house looked wrong, naked and exposed. Isabel came out the front door, a cordless phone pressed to her ear. She saw my face and her expression shifted from annoyance to a practiced look of sympathy. "Oh, Cora. I was going to call you," she said, ending her call. "The tree," I managed to say, my voice a strangled whisper. "My father's tree." "I know, it's a shock," she said, putting a hand on my arm. I flinched away. But the roots were getting dangerously close to the foundation. The arborist said it was a real risk. We had to be proactive. "It opens up the whole front of the house, doesn't it? So much more light." "You didn't ask me." "Well, it was an emergency, really. We had to make a quick decision," she said smoothly. Daniel agreed it was for the best. Daniel. Of course, Daniel agreed. He would agree to anything to keep the peace, to keep Isabel happy. But this wasn't a dishwasher. This was a living monument to my father. This was a piece of my soul, and they had ripped it out of the ground without a second thought. I looked from the stump to Isabel's placid, untroubled face. She wasn't sorry. She was relieved. The tree, with its history and its messy leaves, was gone, replaced by more light. And in that moment, I understood. They didn't see the house as a gift, a sanctuary steeped in love and memory. They saw it as an asset, a project, a thing to be stripped of its past and molded to their modern tastes. And I was just the inconvenient, sentimental owner who stood in the way of its potential. I didn't say another word. I turned around, got back in my car, and drove away. The tears I'd been holding back for 2 years finally came, hot and bitter. They weren't just tears for a tree. They were for the loss of my son, for the death of the beautiful, naive dream I had held for his future in that house. Margot was right. The pasture was almost bare. It was time to build a fence. A very, very high one. For a week, I was a ghost in my own life. I went to the nursery, watered my plants, and answered Margot's concerned calls with vague assurances that I was fine. But inside, a quiet revolution was taking place. The grief over the maple tree slowly hardened into a cold, clear resolve. It was the kind of clarity that comes after a long fever, when the world seems sharper, more real. The years of gentle giving, of accommodating, of making myself smaller to fit their needs, had to end. The Periwinkle house was not a home for them anymore. It had become a weapon they used to bleed me dry, emotionally and financially. It was time to take it back. Not to live in, but to let go of on my own terms. The following Monday, I made an appointment with a realtor Margot had recommended. Her name was Helen, a woman with kind eyes and a firm, professional handshake that inspired confidence. We met in my apartment, a neutral territory where I felt grounded. I explained the situation, my voice low but steady. I told her about the house, its history, and its current occupants. I didn't editorialize or complain, I just stated the facts. It's in my name, free and clear. I pay all the taxes and major upkeep. My son and his wife live there rent-free. Helen listened patiently, her expression unreadable. When I was finished, she nodded slowly. "This is a delicate situation, Cora. But not an uncommon one, unfortunately. Are you certain this is the path you want to take?" I looked out my window at the tide slowly receding from the estuary mudflats, exposing the solid ground beneath. "I am," I said. "The house deserves a family who will love it, not just strip it for parts. And I deserve peace." "All right then," she said, her tone all business. "The key will be discretion. We can list it privately at first, showing it only to pre-qualified buyers who understand the sensitive nature of the tenancy. We'll need to schedule viewings carefully. Can you get them out of the house for a few hours at a time?" A sad, ironic smile touched my lips. "That's the easiest part," I said. "I'll just tell them I'm coming over to do some gardening." The process was a covert operation conducted in whispers and carefully timed maneuvers. Helen was brilliant, a silent partner in my quiet rebellion. She found a young couple within 2 weeks. They were doctors moving to Port Blossom to work at the local hospital, expecting their first child. When I met them for the official viewing under the guise of me showing a friend the garden, I knew they were the ones. The woman, whose name was Julia, walked into the living room and her hand went to her mouth. "Oh, the light in here is just beautiful," she breathed, looking at the very windows Isabel had called drafty. Her husband, Mark, ran his hand over the worn oak banister. "You can feel the history here," he said. "This place feels loved." They walked through the garden, and Julia pointed to the empty patch of earth where the maple tree had been. "That's a perfect spot for a swing set someday," she said, smiling at her husband. My heart ached with a strange mix of sorrow and relief. This was the dream I'd had. It just wasn't my son who would be living it. We stood on the porch, and I told them about my parents, about growing up in the house. I wasn't selling them a property, I was passing on a legacy. They made an offer that afternoon, a fair price that was slightly above asking. They were willing to be flexible with the closing date, but they wanted to be in before their baby arrived in 3 months. I accepted. The papers were drawn up. The closing was set for 6 weeks' time. For 6 weeks, I carried my secret like a fragile, precious stone in my pocket, feeling its weight with every interaction. I saw Daniel and Isabel a few times during that period. They were blissfully unaware, preoccupied with their next project, redoing the kitchen. "We found this amazing Italian marble for the countertops, Mom," Daniel told me, his eyes shining with a familiar, boyish excitement that now just looked like entitlement. "And Isabel found a designer who can draw up plans. We were thinking, if you could help us with the initial deposit, think of it as an investment in the equity." "I'll have to think about it," I said, my voice even. It was the first time I hadn't immediately agreed to consider it. Daniel looked surprised. Isabel, who was scrolling through her phone, looked up with a frown. "What's there to think about, Cora? It's a no-brainer. The kitchen is the heart of the home. A modern kitchen could add $50,000 to the value easy." "The heart of this home was just fine," I said, and the quiet steel in my voice made them both fall silent. I saw a flicker of confusion in Daniel's eyes and a flash of irritation in Isabel's. The tectonic plates of our relationship were shifting, and they were just beginning to feel the tremors. The day before the closing, I knew I had to tell them. Doing it any other way felt cowardly. I called Daniel. "Hey, can I come over this evening? There's something I need to discuss with you both." "Sure, Mom." "Is everything okay?" He sounded concerned, but it was the shallow concern of someone whose routine might be disrupted. "I'm fine, Daniel. I'll be there around 7. I spent the afternoon in my own garden, my hands in the dirt, drawing strength from the simple, honest work of tending to living things. I felt strangely calm. The storm was about to break, but I was no longer afraid of the rain. I had spent a lifetime bending to the wind. Now I would be the quiet, unmovable stone. I arrived at the Periwinkle house at 7 o'clock sharp. The evening was calm, the sky painted in soft lavender and rose. As I walked up the path, I noticed the raw, ugly stump of my father's maple tree. It was no longer a wound, it was a reminder. A symbol of the line that had been crossed. They were in the living room, a bottle of wine open on the coffee table, glossy kitchen design magazines spread out around them. The scene was so perfectly domestic, so utterly oblivious. "Mom." "Hey, come on in," Daniel said, getting up to give me a perfunctory hug. "Wine?" "No, thank you, Daniel." Isabel didn't get up. She simply looked at me from the sofa, a coolly expectant look on her face. "Cora, you sounded so serious on the phone. Is everything all right?" I remained standing, my handbag clutched in my hands like a shield. I looked from my son's trusting face to his wife's calculating one. There was no gentle way to do this. There was only the truth. "I'm here to let you know that I have sold the house," I said. The words hung in the air, clean and sharp and irrevocable. Silence. Daniel's smile faltered, then vanished. He let out a short, confused laugh. "Sold it? What are you talking about?" "That's not funny, Mom." "I'm not joking," I said, my gaze steady. Isabel's face went through a rapid series of transformations, confusion, disbelief, and then a dark, rising fury. She stood up slowly, her eyes narrowing. "You did what?" "I sold the house," I repeated, my voice quiet but firm. "The closing was today. It's done. The new owners will be taking possession in 30 days. You'll have a month to find a new place to live." Daniel stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. But why? How could you? This is our home." "No, Daniel," I said, and for the first time, the deep well of my pain and disappointment surfaced in my voice. "This is my house. It was my home and my parents' home before me. I let you live here, hoping you would treat it as such. But it has only ever been a project to you. A resource. A stepping stone." "That's not true," he stammered, looking helplessly at Isabel. Isabel stepped forward, her mask of civility gone completely. Her face was tight with rage. "How dare you," she spat, her voice low and venomous. "After everything we've done to improve this place. The money we've poured into it." The sheer audacity of her statement almost made me laugh. "The money you've poured into it? Isabel, I paid for the dishwasher. I paid for the new water heater. I've paid the taxes every year. I gave you a place to live rent-free for 2 years while you got on your feet. What I have received in return is a list of demands and the stump of a tree my father planted." "The tree was dying," she shrieked. "We were protecting your investment. You were erasing my history." I countered, my voice rising for the first time. "You were erasing every part of this house that had meaning, that didn't fit your sterile, modern aesthetic. You never saw this place as a gift. You saw it as a problem to be fixed." Daniel finally found his voice, a desperate, pleading whine. "Mom, please. We can fix this. Just call the buyers. Tell them it was a mistake. We'll start paying rent. We'll do whatever you want." "It's too late for that, Daniel," I said, my voice softening with a deep, weary sadness as I looked at my son. "The time for that was 2 years ago. Or last year. Or last month. The time for that was before you let her convince you that my memories were less important than her desire for more light." Isabel let out a harsh, ugly laugh. "Her memories. You're pathetic. A sentimental old woman living in the past. We were trying to bring this house into the present for you. We were going to let you live here in your old age." The final lie, the most outrageous of them all, hung in the air. The idea that they were the generous ones, that they were doing me a favor. That was the moment my last shred of attachment to their opinion of me dissolved. "Let me live here?" I asked, a genuine, quiet curiosity in my voice. "In a room in the back, I suppose? After you'd renovated it into your perfect showpiece, using the rest of my retirement savings." "You have no idea what you've just done," Isabel seethed, her hands clenched into fists. "You've thrown it all away. For what? To be stubborn? To be spiteful? You'll end up alone. You'll have no one." The threat, meant to be the final, killing blow, landed with no force at all. A profound calm settled over me. I looked at her, at this angry, grasping woman who had so thoroughly captured my son, and I felt nothing but a distant pity. I smiled, a small, sad, steady smile. "Alone," I said softly, "is better than being used." Then I turned my back on them. On the half-finished kitchen plans, on the wreckage of their expectations, on my son's stricken face. I walked out the front door and down the path, and I never once looked back. I drove home slowly, the engine a soft hum beneath me as I wound through the quiet streets, feeling every breath steady itself. The sun had dipped low by the time I pulled into the parking lot of my modest apartment building. Not grand, not flashy, but mine. Fully mine. By the time I locked my door behind me, I imagined the scene still unfolding back at that house. My house. Now, someone else's house. The movers, the new couple, Julia and Mark, happily settling into the place Daniel and Isabel once believed was untouchable. And them, standing outside on that driveway, surrounded by the wreckage of their plans. Their house gone, their schemes exposed, their illusions shattered. The phone buzzed once on the counter. A text message. It was from Daniel. "Mom, please. Can we talk? This isn't what I wanted. Please." I stared at the words, cold and empty. He hadn't even called me Mom in person for months, not with any real affection. It was always a preface to a request. But now, stripped of everything, he suddenly remembered who I was to him. I didn't reply. A second message followed within minutes. I'm sorry. Isabel got carried away. She pushed me, you know how she is. I never wanted to hurt you. I could almost hear his voice in those words, desperate, reaching, scrambling to rewrite history now that there was nothing left to steal. My thumb hovered over the screen, but I didn't type anything back. Because I had finally learned. You only miss me now that I said no. I placed the phone face down on the table and walked toward the window. The evening breeze carried the faint sound of children playing somewhere down the street, their laughter simple and honest. Behind me, the apartment was quiet, safe. Empty in the best way. No manipulation, no agendas. Just peace. They thought I couldn't live without them, that my life's purpose was to serve theirs. But the truth was, I had been suffocating beneath the weight of their expectations for years. Every sacrifice I made, every dollar, every hour of my life poured into that house, that family, had been turned into a weapon they used against me. And yet, standing here now, stripped of the one material thing I once clung to so tightly, I had never felt lighter. Let them rage. Let them scramble. Let them blame. I had nothing left to give them. And that, I realized, made me the freest woman alive. I whispered it into the empty room, a quiet prayer meant only for me, a truth blooming late in the season of my life. Quiet doesn't mean weak. And finally, I believed it.